Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the reports that Nigel Farage is planning on using defecting Tories, with one in particular as a candidate to contest Rishi Sunak's seat if he stands down once the new Conservative leader is selected. So would Sunak actually stand down despite having promised to remain for the full term? And would Reform UK stand a chance of winning? But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So first of all, it's actually quite amusing because I read this report on the GB News website. So you're reading this report from GB News about rumours of what Nigel Farage may be doing, and you're thinking, well, Nigel Farage is your employee. It'd be like the BBC reporting on what one of their political correspondents is rumoured to be up to. Rumoured to be up to, he told you in the canteen, didn't he? That's where the rumours came from, but never mind that. The broad thrust of the article is that Farage expects Sunak to step down next month, Oliver Dowden as well as it happens, and that Reform UK want to launch a major campaign in Sunak's constituency. More than that, they reckon they've got a high-profile candidate lined up in the form of a defecting former Tory MP. Now, this is where you have to decide whether we believe Reform UK have a high-profile defection in line. Towards the end of the last Parliament, Richard Tice, who was at the time the leader, kept insisting he was talking to numerous Tory MPs, I think it may have been up to 9, about defecting. And yet the only defections that did happen were to Labour. Lee Anderson doesn't count because he had already lost the Tory whip with little prospect of getting it back when he joined Reform UK. However, it could be argued that Conservative MPs at the time might not have really believed that Reform UK would be able to win seats, and perhaps that perception has now changed. Also, if this is a former Tory MP, if they've already lost their seat and they don't think there's a realistic prospect of being made the Conservative candidate again in a winnable seat in the foreseeable future, they may feel they've got nothing to lose. At which point you then have to wonder, so what counts as high profile? Also, when the article says former Tory MP, I'm thinking in terms of someone who lost their seat at this year's election. But I suppose it could have been someone who was a Tory MP some time ago. I hope they don't mean Anne Widdecombe. But as they say defecting, that presumably means they're still currently, as far as anyone's concerned, a member of the Conservative Party. In actual fact, the article says that Reform have actually got 2 former and 1 current Tory MP ready to defect. Now, in terms of a current Tory MP, so let's say we believe this for now, of course, there's a lot of ifs here. Presumably, it would either be someone who's in a seat which, okay, they won this year, but maybe they think Reform UK, maybe they weren't comfortable with the votes that Reform UK got, and they think that actually at the next election, if they don't have much faith in either of the 2 candidates who's going to be leader, that they think Reform UK have got a better chance in their seat in the next election. Maybe that would be a reason to defect to Reform UK. The alternative, of course, is someone like Suella Braverman. But I would be surprised if any Tory MP, including Braverman, defected without first seeing how their own party is shaping up for the next election, which you can't possibly do so early on in the parliamentary cycle before the next leader has even been announced. But in terms of former Tory MPs, so who are the former Tory MPs who you would say are high profile and might be tempted by Reform UK? Like, I think we can rule out people like Steve Baker, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Michael Gove. You could say, well, you know, they're fairly extreme, but I think they are committed Conservatives. And I think Steve Baker's done. I think Michael Gove is done. And I think Jacob Rees-Mogg probably expects to come back as a Conservative MP in the future, maybe at a by-election himself, or maybe just at the next election. Jake Berry might be a bit of a dark horse, but I'd be doubtful there too. The one that sticks out for me would be Miriam Cates. Now, she's a proper nutter. She's already in Yorkshire, and her area is more likely to see Reform gains than Tory gains in the immediate future. She was recently writing about how the Tories need Reform UK. In fact, she has effectively described Reform UK as being what the Conservative Party should emulate. So she could definitely be a possibility. The other possibilities that stand out to me would be like Brenda Clark-Smith or Jonathan C. Gullis. I mean, I hear C. Gullis is still looking for a job. But of the many, many Tory MPs who lost their seats this summer, I think I would say the rest of them are either the sort who are unlikely to defect to Reform UK or ones I wouldn't really describe as high profile. But I mean, maybe Farage isn't all that precious. Beggars can't be choosers. Maybe he would consider any former MP to be high profile. Who knows? Mind you, all of this relies on Rishi Sunak actually resigning from the Commons. He promised that he would stick out the full term. Now, to be fair to him, if he did lie about that, I don't think anyone would really hold it against him. First of all, he made that promise during the election campaign itself. He could hardly fight the election campaign as Prime Minister and Conservative Party leader by saying, yeah, if we lose, I'm out of here. You won't see me arse for dust, mate. So obviously he had to say that he would be committing. But it happens all the time. If he, he could then say, oh, well, circumstances changed or something like that. Who knows? But the article says that Farage has received intelligence that Sunak plans to step down. I'm not sure I would believe this. Because let's say Rishi Sunak were planning to step down, which might be possible. He doesn't really have to tell anyone. I mean, presumably he would tell his wife. I don't think she would blab to Nigel Farage. He doesn't actually have to tell anyone that he does not completely trust not to go running to the media. It's much more likely that Reform UK are just getting ready for the possibility without really having any idea whether he will resign or not. In terms of whether I think Sunak would step down, I think there's a good chance he would. But I'm not sure he would do it next month. I think he might wait for a bit. The reason I say that is because Sunak could have buggered off straight away after the election, leaving an interim leader in place. That he stuck around suggests that he genuinely wants to help his party out with the transition. Now, it may be that what this really is about is for future employers to show that he doesn't just cut and run, right? But for whatever the reason, he's genuinely helped his party out by providing that bit of stability and sticking around. Now, you could argue that once the new leader is in place, he is free to disappear, but this isn't quite true because as soon as he steps down, a by-election is triggered, and the Tories will not want what is at the moment a buoyant Reform UK nicking it. It is a fairly safe seat, but these are uncertain times for the Tories. The new leader would not have their campaign team established, so they'd be chasing their tails a bit if they suddenly find they have to fight a by-election unprepared. So if Sunak really wants to keep showing that he's helping his party, but let's say he doesn't want to stick around for the rest of the Parliament, I would think, at least wait until next summer or something. Besides, Reform UK, they're in a fairly good place in the polls right now. The Tories are still about as popular as syphilis, and Labour seem happy to tank their poll ratings, confident that they will get them back once they start their delivery in a few years. The Conservatives are also struggling for funds. At the moment, all things considered, it's not a good time for the Conservatives to be fighting a by-election. And if Sunak is sticking around because he doesn't want to look like he's dropped his party in the shit, then you would think he'll stick around for a few months more as well. Mind you, the counter to that is that if Reform UK decide that Sunak will step down at some point, they could always start campaigning in his constituency now and build up some support. I did wonder if Farage's support for Putin might be a drag factor for Reform UK in what is a military constituency. But that same thinking would mean Sunak would have suffered over his D-Day disgrace, and yet he actually won comfortably in the end. In fact, if we look at the results from the summer, for Reform UK to win, they'd have to more than double their vote share. Realistically, and that's assuming, of course, that they get most of those votes from the Conservatives. Now, it's worth pointing out, because lots of people use general elections to vote for the government and not really for candidates, these people don't bother with by-elections because it can't actually change the government. So in a by-election, the reason why you get a much reduced turnout is because the people who turn up are not ones who are just interested in voting for the government. They're the ones who are interested in voting. So they're more interested in politics. And they're also the sorts of people who are more prepared to vote for someone who won't realistically win. So that means you do get more of a concentration of voters for candidates or parties who can't realistically win, including Reform UK. But what we saw from by-elections over the past couple of years is when you look at Reform UK's national polling at the time, and then you look at the seats they contested in by-elections, they generally, in fact, they almost exclusively underperformed. They badly underperformed, and it was always put down to, it's because there's a lack of coordinated local groups. All of their appeal is national, you know, because they get so much free airtime on the media, but they don't have the ground game. And Reform UK have identified this as a weakness. Their party chair, Zia Yusuf, has said, this is the problem. This is one of our big problems. We're going to address it. And okay, but it's not something they can address in the next few months. Also, just because it's a by-election doesn't mean to say that candidates outside the main fight suddenly like double their vote share or anything. So it would be a tough one for Reform to win. You know, when discussing this on the Politics Social stream this morning, I did wonder if maybe one silver lining. So let's say Sunak did step down next month, like pretty much straight away. One silver lining of a quick by-election could be that Conservative voters may turn out in force to help the new leader, because they may realise, well, if Reform UK wins, that's going to like knock the new leader immediately, and it's not really their fault. So, you know, we'll turn up to do them a solid, in the belief that the new leader will actually address the problems of the party. But this works on the assumption that they'll sort of know the leader's going to mess up. So I doubt they'll actually want Sunak to step down early if he has to at all. But then I remembered, there's already, I talked about this recently, but there was a report that there's already a feeling in the Conservative Party, the parliamentary party, that there are some Tory MPs who are planning on stepping down next year anyway, if they're not given a decent role by the new party leader. Because Labour have blocked some of their more lucrative second jobs. And they'll be blocking some more later, but they've already blocked some, which is affecting some Tory MPs. So even if Sunak doesn't step down, or doesn't do so early on, if Farage really does have some former Tories who are ready to defect and be representing them in the by-elections, he will still find use for them between now and next summer, which opens up interesting options, I suppose, for Labour and the Lib Dems, because if Reform UK did manage to nick a Tory seat in a by-election, it would only need to be one, or even run very close. It wouldn't actually technically need to win, just run close. It would make the Tories more likely to want to occupy the same ground, and they're already looking like that's where they're going, which then makes it easier for Labour and the Lib Dems, of course, to appeal to the voters who actually swing elections. In fact, you would think the first priority for the new Conservative leader, if they've got their heads screwed on, would be to try and avoid as many by-elections next year as possible. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.